One of the first things that every investigator learns is that people remember events differently. Some details are accurate, some are incomplete, and some, well, they simply can't be verified. That's why investigators do not solve cases with opinions. They solve them with timelines. Today, we're going to walk through the events of Christmas Eve 2002, exactly as investigators had to. One reported event, one witness, and one verified fact at a time. Today, my friend, we stop looking at the Scott Peterson story and start thinking like investigators. It's time to open the case file. Welcome to Charlie Investigates. I'm Charlie, and this is Charlie Investigates.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Investigates is dedicated to examining controversial criminal cases through disciplined investigation, critical thinking, and respect for the evidence. Our goal is not to persuade listeners toward a predetermined conclusion, but to present verified facts, examine competing interpretations, identify unanswered questions, and encourage thoughtful analysis. The pursuit of truth is more important than defending any theory. All individuals described or mentioned in this presentation should be considered innocent unless or until found guilty in a court of law.
Well, hello and welcome to Charlie Investigates. Here we do not take you to a crime story where you sit in the spectator seat. Oh no, we're going to put you right into the investigation where you put yourself into the shoes of an investigator. And we see it as a case to investigate rather than a case to entertain. Now, if you like this approach, please reach out with a shout out and let us know. Better yet, like, subscribe, and reveal. You see, this will help us get the word out to others. And by the way, I want to take just a moment to thank you for your support.
The following podcast is brought to you by PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com. Audio is provided by Pixabay.com. That's Pixabay.com.
Now, as we return to the Peterson investigation, remember the approach we're taking throughout the series. We're not starting with conclusions. We're starting with the information that investigators had at the time. What was reported? What was observed? What could be verified? And then, my friend, we follow the evidence. And the best way to follow an evidence is that every investigation begins with a single question. However, solving a case requires hundreds of more. And on Christmas Eve 2002, a pregnant woman vanished without a trace. Detectives did not begin with answers. They began with a clock, minute by minute, witness by witness, fact by fact. And today, we're going to rebuild that timeline and we're going to follow the evidence. Now, in many cases, there may be no eyewitnesses to the most critical moment. So that timeline becomes the most important investigative tool an investigator has in his toolkit. All right, let's quickly catch up with the timeline so far. It was in 1994. Now, if you've got your investigator notebook, you might want to put that date down, 1994. It was there that Scott Peterson and Laci met while attending the Cal Tech University. They call it Cal Poly. Laci was working at the Pacific Cafe, which was a restaurant there in the Bay. Scott came into the restaurant with a friend, and according to accounts from family members, well, Laci noticed Scott and was interested in meeting him. She reportedly gave her phone code number to a mutual friend and asked them to pass it along to Scott. Scott called her soon afterward. Now, while we do not know the exact time of day or maybe the specific day of the week that they met, we do know that it was 1994 that they met. Our next entry is 1997. This was actually on August the 9th, 1997, when Scott and Laci were married. That relationship blossomed into a marriage. They were married at the Sycamore Mineral Springs Resort. Oh, it was a luxurious resort. A lot of weddings were held there. There were also conferences, family reunions. The wedding ceremony was actually private, but yet, even though it was private, it was pretty well attended, according to reports. Now, you may want to know why this is important in a timeline. If I was investigating this case, well, I would send my investigators to visit the resort. I'd have them talk to managers, the hosts, ask them if anything stood out about the wedding. You see, we find that it's at weddings that people are sometimes, believe it or not, stressed out. And you might find some interesting things about the bride and the groom. All of this is called background investigation to help us to understand the people that we are gathering information about. Well, it turns out, my friend, I was right there because the police did send someone there. But, that's for another time. Right now, we're simply focusing on a timeline up to Laci's disappearance. 1994, they met. 1997, they got married. Investigators will, of course, look between 1994 and 1997 to see if anything happened between those years. It was 3 years before they got married. Here in those 3 years, what happened? Did they break up? If so, what was it about? So they marry now, and we go in our timeline and kick it up now for 1998. In 1998 to 2000 on our timeline, we know that they did make a move to Modesto. Scott would begin a fertilized cells career. Laci, well, she becomes involved with the family. In fact, she wanted to move back there to get closer to her family. And she inserts herself into the community activities. And then spring 2002. Wonderful time for most couples. Laci becomes pregnant. The pregnancy then progresses into the summer and fall of 2002. They both work on putting together a nursery, and they come up with a name for the child. His name was Connor. Due date? February the 10th, 2003. Now, my friend, we're getting to the place where we stop telling the story and a real investigation begins. Get your investigator notebook out, and you'll want to enter this date, December the 23rd. Now, just as a sidebar, let me tell you that this date is going to become very important in the investigation. But for now, we don't know why. We only know that Scott mentioned details and others to detectives about the first hours of the investigation on December the 23rd. December the 23rd, Scott and Laci went to her sister's, that is Laci's sister's hair salon, and there Scott got a haircut. Now think about that for a moment. Little did her sister at that point know that they together as sisters were spending time together, and that the very next day her sister would vanish without a trace. But after Scott and Laci left the salon, they went for pizza, brought it home, settled in for the night. Laci calls her mom, has a conversation with her mother. You see, it appears on December the 23rd that both Scott and Laci seem to be planning nothing more than a quiet holiday, entertaining the family, enjoying each other's company. But then, the next day, all of that changed. It was the day before Christmas, Christmas Eve. Scott Peterson got up early that morning, somewhere between 8 and 8:30. Laci, well, she was already up. Many said that she was an early riser. In fact, she often started her day around 7 a.m. And of course, the day before, throughout the community, there was last-minute shopping. Presents were wrapped. Some traveled to go visit loved ones. But the Peterson family, they had a planned Christmas dinner that evening, Christmas Eve, at Laci's mom's house. So what happened? What happened from early morning to early afternoon when Scott Peterson returns home to an empty house and a missing wife? How do we know what really happened? Well, that's the point. What really happened will be debated over and over and over again, even 20 years later. So we just build the timeline based on what information is available at the time. Does that mean we believe the information? Well, not really. We do not believe or disbelieve. We're just gathering information. We're going to sift through that and we're going to determine if it does stand the test of reliability. You see, at Charlie Investigates, we have an investigative toolkit. And in that toolkit, we have, now listen to this, an ECS, Evidence Confidence Scale. You see, instead of me saying to you, I believe this is true, you're more likely to hear me say, well, it's confirmed, or it's supported, or it's reliable. We have a confidence level to major factual claims. We may say it's confirmed. In other words, it's supported by multiple reliable sources. We may say that it's strongly reported, that we have highly persuasive evidence, but not beyond dispute. We may say it's plausible, reasonable, maybe interpretation with meaningful supporting evidence. So we're going to be looking at this evidence and we're going to constantly be asking ourselves, is this evidence reliable? It could be uncertain. It could be unsupported. We owe it to you, the listener, to tell you how firmly each conclusion rests on available evidence. Now put that in your own evidence locker as we continue to share with you details about what has been reported that day. And when Scott got up, he now later told witnesses that Laci was watching Martha Stewart, and he remembered a specific segment on that particular program. Now put your investigation hat on. If you were to hear that, you would place that into your investigator notebook, and you'd have a little note there to research the show to see that if it would back up what you're hearing. You do not at this point credit or discredit that part. You simply document it at this point in the investigation. So we know now that they got up, and according to him, they were listening to Martha Stewart. And ongoing, according to Scott's account, Laci had plans that day. She was preparing for Christmas. She intended to finish some household tasks. She was going to mop the floor. She was going to walk the dog Mackenzie. And later, she was going grocery shopping. Now, as that information comes to me, I have some things to check off in my notebook. But for now, we're just going to put all this in our evidence locker. For if we are looking for her, if later we find that we're called, as cops were, to the house, we're going to be checking some things. We're going to check the residence. We're going to check the place where she walked the dog. We might even find shops where she went for groceries so we can see if anybody saw her there. But in our timeline now, we're simply following the flow of information. While Laci had her plans, well, Scott had his plans as well. He planned to go fishing. He left the house around 9:30, went to pick up his boat at the office, which was located in a warehouse. He was there, of course, a fertilizer distributor, and it was there that he had his office. According to reports, he took time to get caught up on some emails and a little bit of work while stopping by his office. Now, managers of business will tell you that during holidays, it can be a time to spend reflecting on your work and even handle some things you've not been able to do with people around. On holidays, businesses are not usually busy. So up till this time, the morning appears to be routine. But the moment Scott Peterson left his house, this investigation will eventually focus intensely on what happened the hours that followed that. Well, I think right now would be a good time to take a quick break. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever done something really dumb? Now, don't answer that. It may incriminate you. But there are a group of crazy crooks out there that just can't keep from incriminating themselves. And my friend, right now it is time for Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the week. Well, you just can't make this stuff up. The Crazy Crook gets our Golden Handcuff Award for criminal incompetence. This week's Crazy Crook comes from Florida. Yep, another Florida man, where one suspect apparently forgot one very important rule committing a crime. What is that? Well, don't stop for snacks. According to deputies, the man allegedly burglarized a home, gathered up several items he wanted to steal. But instead of making a quick getaway, well, investigators say, he just wandered into the kitchen, found some food, and literally decided to cook himself a meal. Yep, he stopped in the middle of a burglary to make a lunch. He wasn't in a hurry either. Detective said he helped himself to the homeowner's food. He relaxed, left behind plenty of evidence, including, get this, fingerprints, surprise, 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 and DNA that helped to identify him. Apparently, this crazy crook thought he was checking into a bed and breakfast instead of breaking into someone's home. Needless to say, deputies had very little difficulty finding him afterward. And so, my friend, the Golden Handcuff Award from Charlie Crimebuster goes to the burglar who turned a quick burglary into a sit-down lunch and an easy arrest. And that, my friend, is Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook. So at this point in the investigation, now we're back to Scott Peterson. His boat is housed in a warehouse where his business is located. So he goes over there, and as we said earlier, he makes some times getting some emails taken care of, and then he takes off on his fishing trip. We have Laci doing her thing, and now we have Scott doing his thing. Now, I want to take a moment and I want to introduce you to our very first and one of the more important witnesses in this case. Now, there will be other witnesses, but this one fits into our timeline at this very point. Karen Service was a neighbor of Scott and Laci Peterson, and she lived near their home there on the avenue in Modesto. On the morning of December the 24th, 2002, she left her home to run some errands, but when she returned, she did notice Mackenzie, the Petersons' golden retriever. He was wandering loose in the neighborhood, according to her, with his leash still attached. Karen was familiar with the neighbors. She had even gone over there and enjoyed the swimming pool upon their invitation and this sort of thing. But she found that dog, and she took Mackenzie back to the Peterson residence. She found the side gate closed. But she went around and she placed Mackenzie in the backyard, and then she closed the gate behind her. Now, this event has consistently been placed at approximately 10:18 a.m. based on her testimony. And as the investigators reconstruct a timeline, this time marker is a very important anchor in putting together the events of that morning. Her testimony is important. Now, from an investigative standpoint, Karen did not tell detectives what happened to Laci, but she did establish when one specific event occurred, and that's a huge difference. That testimony would help investigators ask questions like, number one, when did Mackenzie get out? Was that leash attached when he was found? If Karen returned the dog at approximately 10:18 a.m., where was Laci at that time? All of those are investigative questions. And as I said earlier, investigations are a part of answering questions. Not coming to conclusions, but asking questions. There are several reasons why Karen is a really strong witness. Number one, she had no apparent connection to the outcome of the case, beyond just being a neighbor. Her account remains generally consistent. She also described a specific memorial event rather than trying to reconstruct a long list of activities. Her actions, returning the dog, it's straightforward, it's understandable, it's easy to acknowledge that. Now, that doesn't mean that every detail that she was involved in is beyond question, but it does explain why investigators and the court itself regarding her observation as a very important timeline marker. You see, investigators often rely on people, sometimes who have no idea that they're helping to solve a case. Karen wasn't looking for clues, she was simply being a good neighbor. But by taking Mackenzie home and remembering approximately when it happened, she unknowingly, she established one of the most important time markers in an early investigation. So back to our timeline. Scott is now returning to the residence after he put his boat in its place in the warehouse. It is about 4:45 p.m. on the afternoon of Christmas Eve. He pulls into the driveway. According to him, he'd already placed 2 calls to Laci during the day. Was not able to reach her. He gets out of the truck, and he realizes in less than 2 hours he's due at dinner at Laci's parents' house. He's greeted by his dog, Mackenzie. He looks there and he sees the dangling leash. He unclips the leash, tosses it on the table. The back door is unlocked, and he steps into an empty house. Now, his next actions, of course, as you and I know, will be reviewed intently over the course of the investigation. According to him, he carries a bucket of wash water and empties it on the lawn, leaves that and 2 mops by the door. He's hungry, did not have lunch, so he gets a snack of leftover pizza and milk out of the refrigerator. Remember now, for all day, he had only eaten a bowl of cereal early that morning. He then takes his clothes that he had worn and he places them into the washer, starts the washing machine. He puts on clean clothes, and this is around 5:15, and then he calls Laci's parents' house, and he simply asks, "Is Laci there?" He then mentions to Laci's mom that Laci's car is at the house, and that he found the dog, Mackenzie, with a leash still on it. Now, you can imagine at this point, perhaps both Scott and her mom are thinking the unthinkable. What happened to Laci? Questions come to their mind. Laci is 8 months pregnant. Had something happened to her? Did she call an ambulance? Was she at the hospital? Well, my friend, Laci's mom, she quickly turns into what I call mom mode. She takes control. She tells Scott to call their friends, check to see if they've seen her or know where she is, and then to get right back with her. A few minutes later, Scott calls back. And when he calls back, he has more bad news. No one's seen Laci. She then tells him to check with the neighbors as well. A few minutes later, he calls back again with no trace of Laci. He does tell her that Laci was planning to take Mackenzie to the park to walk the dog. It was at the East Loma Park, located just down at the end of Scott and Laci's house. She then tells Scott to meet her at the park, and she, my friend, is in what we call full mom mode. She calls her friend Sandy Rickard, asks her to come and help her search for Laci, then tells her husband, Ron, call the police. And so at 5:47 p.m., Ron Gransky dials 911. He probably would have heard the clicking of the keyboard as the dispatcher makes notes of the call. Those notes read exactly like this. Stepdaughter, Laci Peterson, Portuguese, white, female, 26 years, left to walk dog at Dry Creek Park and never returned home. Subject is 5'1", dark hair, dark eyes, 8 months pregnant. Unknown who last seen with. Dog returned home with leash. Unable to locate woman anywhere. Report received from woman's husband, Scott Peterson. Husband is now in the park. Officer John Evers dispatched to the park at 1748. Those are literally the notes that dispatcher made that day. So now we know police are alerted. And you're probably thinking, well, in most police shows that you see on TV, families are told to wait a number of hours before they file a missing person report. While that has been true in the past, it is quite different now in most places. We're realizing more and more how the first 24 hours are critical in a missing person case. On top of that, hey, this is a pregnant woman, very vulnerable. She could be hurt. She could have fallen, hurt herself. She could be lying on the ground somewhere. And it is Christmas. Christmas, a time when families gather, not when loved ones should be disappearing. Well, I think we can all agree that we would hate to have those kind of things written into a police report and follow-up notes from a dispatcher. I can't imagine how Laci's mother was feeling during those moments when she realized that her daughter was missing. But I have to tell you that now, my friend, this is the time that the investigation really gets going. And we're going to follow the evidence. We're going to hopefully not only investigate this particular crime, but we will unfortunately end up investigating the investigation itself. Because now we find that investigation is put into question. So this is where the real investigation begins. In our next episode of Charlie Investigates, we're going to continue to follow the evidence as the search for Laci Peterson grows way beyond the neighborhood and captures national attention. We will examine the expanding investigation. We will look at the information that investigators uncovered and the very moments that begin changing the direction of this case. Because in every investigation, there comes a moment when the questions become more focused, the evidence becomes more significant, and the case begins to take a brand new shape. And there will also be a simple phone call. A simple phone call that will turn this investigation on its head. Until then, remember, keep asking questions. Follow the evidence. I'm Charlie, and this is Charlie Investigates.
You've been listening to Charlie Crimebuster Investigates. You can find more Charlie Crimebuster Investigate true crime podcasts on your favorite podcast platforms. We would like to thank our hosting service, Libsyn.com. We would also like to thank our sponsor, the Peacemaker Network, and encourage you to support the first responders, military, and law enforcement personnel by contributing to the Peacemaker Network. That's peacemakernetwork.com. All music and sound effects are courtesy of Pixabay.com. You can also support us by subscribing to our YouTube channel, tag @CharlieCrimebuster, and then click the subscribe button. By doing so, you'll be notified each time we drop one of our shows. Another more convenient way for you to listen to our podcasts are for you to say to your smart speaker, play Charlie Crimebuster. If you have comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you, so please send them to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or you can call or text us 407-917-2211. That's 407-917-2211. On behalf of Charlie Crimebuster and Donnie Cantwell, I'm James Buckland. Thank you for listening, and we hope that you will join us again for another exciting crime episode with Charlie Crimebuster Investigates.